And this was to help relieve the flurry of activity that the Department of Agriculture and the extension offices had, and we developed this hotline. So it's another source of information that you can call. So where are the spotted lanternfly? Well, the New York State IPM program is really tracking it for the area. And this is the most current map. I pulled this off of their website last night. The blue areas show where there are established populations. So the new places where it exists are Indiana. You see that little county there in Indiana, and we have reason to believe that that came from the Pennsylvania population, but of course they're doing genetic analysis to trace it back. There's a county in Ohio that's kind of, you know, off by itself there up by the lake, some additional counties in New York, and of course look at New Jersey. Every county is blue, shaded in, indicating established populations except Cape May County. So, so if you look at this map closer and, you know, keep up with it online, there are purple dots on this map that show where they have discovered a lanternfly, but they haven't been able to determine that it's an established population. And you can't see it in the level of detail we have with the lighting and everything, but there are purple dots down through North Carolina, a lot of counties in New York, and so on. So I expect over the winter, as the agencies start to announce additional areas, we might see more and more counties being shaded in blue. So what does the quarantine mean? And I want to get this out of the way right away. Pennsylvania, we have a quarantine. There's a quarantine in New Jersey. The quarantines go state by state. It's not a federal quarantine at this point. There's been some discussion about that. But the quarantine rules for your state is what you need to follow. So I looked this up a little bit. I do have a permit. In Pennsylvania, it looks like that little blue paper there, and you keep that in your vehicle. And then I'm required to keep logs for my travel and my inspections of my vehicle and anything that I'm transporting. So to come here today, I have my spotted lanternfly log in my car and proving that I'm trying to do everything I can to not spread it. You can take the permit test for New Jersey, and there's a URL there, but you can just Google and find it. So businesses are required to have a permit. Agencies are required to have a permit. You take the quiz, you get your permit, and then you keep records of your inspections. So getting the permit is the first step. But the real, you know, reason why we have this permitting system is so you're not inadvertently moving spotted lanternfly around. So hopefully you all have your permit, and if you don't, you probably want to get that pretty soon. So we'll get that out of the way. Why are we so concerned about the lanternfly? Well, here's a picture that I took in a vineyard in Berks County, which is where it started, in October of 2019. And you see this block of grapes. These are Gewürztraminer cultivar grapes, and the whole block is dead. So we've had a lot of damage to grapes, and this is our primary concern at the moment. So I brought a slide that has some data from an economic impact study on grapes that was done by some of my coworkers. And in 2017, we saw a 90% yield loss in a 40-acre planting. In 2018, we had 100% death of an 8-acre Pinot Noir planting. From 2016 to 2018, a 45% yield reduction in 10 acres of Chardonnay. And then the increased insecticide costs that ensued. So you can kill lanternfly with insecticides. They're really not hard to kill with just about any insecticide. But the growers, that adds to their bottom line. So in 5 vineyards, the number of insecticide applications in that time period increased from an average of 4.2 applications to 14. And really, grape growers don't want to be out there spraying. Nobody really, I don't think anybody really likes to spray. It's not a fun job. And this increases the average insecticide costs from 54 and change per acre to 147 and change per acre. And what is this going to translate into for the sustainability of our grape growers? So these numbers were gathered, and then, you know, we had the pandemic, and we're ramping up a new survey this year. And I understand my colleagues who are doing it from Penn State are working with the New Jersey grape growers. So New Jersey's information will be captured. We're looking at 2021 data. Stay tuned. We're going to have more information about the impact, the economic impact on grapes. So we're trying to protect the grape growers. But we also have this really unusual insect out there. It has this super broad host range. It really can feed on just about anything it wants to if it has to. We know that it has preferred hosts. So it will feed on tree of heaven, which is Alanthus altissima, an invasive species that came here from Asia. And I'm going to talk about Alanthus altissima a little bit later as we go on. But incidentally, it's something that grows in disturbed soils and often in areas where there are high deer numbers. So the last speaker talked about how the deer changed the ecosystem. And I think our deer situation is part of this mix of why lanternfly can explode into these high populations because of the plant material that's left. So other things that it prefers: grape, both cultivated and wild grape, black walnut, silver and red maple, river birch, willow, sumac, and others. So there's a lot of trees and plants that we see it attacking. It's important to know that we have not seen substantial feeding on conifers. So having this broad host range makes it affect more people and makes it more of a nuisance in landscapes. It's not just affecting one plant or one group of plants. So I brought some of my pictures of damage to trees and woody plants. And I have a picture of a willow. The middle one is staghorn sumac. The one on that end is black walnut. And I don't know if you can see, but that end of that black walnut twig is just, there's piles of lanternfly nymphs feeding on that younger wood of that tree. So we're getting this kind of dieback, wilting first, yellowing in the foliage, and then dieback. But we really haven't seen it kill these trees. So we're trying to figure out how to measure this. So I got this slide from Dr. Kelly Hoover. She's at Penn State in the entomology department, and she is doing a lot of really solid research looking at how spotted lanternfly feeding affects trees. And this is critically important. Pennsylvania is the #1 hardwood supplier in the country. And we don't want to have any problem that's slowing down our production, you know, how many years it takes to get your crop to sale. And also, of course, our green industry, our landscaping. So this is her slide. She has, again, some pictures of the sooty mold on the foliage at the top, and then another picture of walnut with those really big groups of nymphs on the young twigs. So we know it will cause wilted or dead branches on trees, weeping wounds on the tree where it, you know, they tap into the vascular system and then the sap will run down. It could take longer to grow saleable trees. That's of concern for the nursery industry as well as timber. And when there are high numbers of lanternfly feeding, it stresses trees. So we're trying to measure this. She has documented a reduction in photosynthesis and carbohydrate stores, which makes the trees more vulnerable to additional stressors. We're especially wondering what happens in a drought year. So we haven't had a drought year since lanternfly came here. We've had 2015, we had a couple weeks of dry weather in Berks County. That was real early on. But what happens when the trees are under severe drought stress? The honeydew and the sooty mold, so the insect feeds on the tree sap, secretes honeydew, which is partially digested tree sap. The sooty mold grows on that, and that's this black community of fungus. It blocks the photosynthesis of understory trees. That's the picture at the top. And how does that affect the health of our understory? So I should say one other thing that Dr. Hoover has done that's really interesting, and you'll hear more about this, I think. There have been companies that are selling deep root feeding fertilization to help boost the health of the trees. And she has some evidence from her work this summer that fertilization makes it more attractive for lanternflies to feed on it. So the speaker before talked about fertilized plants, deer like them. fertilized trees and plants, we think lanternfly likes those even better. So that's another thing that the tree care professionals need to be watching. Doesn't see it. Okay, so what is the threat to plants? We know we're worried about grapes, but other things. So to date, spotted lanternfly has not been observed to kill plants except for tree of heaven, small tree saplings, and specifically, we've seen that on walnut saplings, wild walnut saplings, and grapevines. So based on our current understanding, spotted lanternfly is best thought of as a plant stressor. And this is a really important message we're trying to get out to the public as these high populations of lanternflies occur in their areas. So lanternfly, even if it's not killing trees, it is a huge nuisance in landscapes. You get these large insects, they're not shy, they'll land on you, they're flying around, they make honeydew, sooty mold, and this is a tree of heaven. Have you smelled that like sour smell that develops in these sites? It has to do with the microbial community that grows in association with these high numbers, but it gets very sour smelling and can be really rank. So it's definitely a nuisance in landscapes. So to show how it's such a nuisance, this is a picture that I took last Friday. I had a reporter, and I won't call her out on what she reports on or where she's from, but it was a national group. She called me up a week ago and she said, hey, can I come get some footage of spotted lanternfly? I took her to this site. This is where we have a study going on of grape cultivars. We have the different cultivars in these little pop-up cages. We have lanternflies in there. We're monitoring their development. And I had the undergraduate intern do this interview with this reporter, national reporter, you know, lots of experience. And the tree in the foreground is an Amer cork tree. So that's an Asian tree. Spotted lanternfly loves that tree. And if you have that tree in your communities for shade trees or street trees, that's one to watch. That tree reliably has lots of lanternfly. It was a warm day last Friday. The adults move around a lot on warm days like that in the fall. They were flying all over. They kept landing on the reporter. And she interviewed me after she interviewed the student. It was the first time in all of my years with Extension that I had a reporter literally screaming during an interview. And it wasn't because she was screaming at anything I was doing. It was because these lanternflies were jumping on her. But you know, some people are just really adverse to insects. So it's a nuisance. So another way that it's a nuisance is shown in these next two pictures. This is me taking pictures while I'm driving down the highway. This is a really kind of steep slope going into the city of Reading in Berks County. And I'm following this truck that you could smell brakes. It was like burning up its brakes. So all along this highway are Tree of Heaven. You see them up there? And I started noticing the street signs. So you see the arrow signs a little hard to see. And then I got down to an even steeper part. And there's a sign right there right next to the truck. I hope you can kind of see where it is. That sign says, watch for stopped vehicles, obliterated by sooty mold. We've seen school bus signs, you know, totally hidden under sooty mold. That's another thing to watch out for. So yeah, it's a nuisance. So with lanternfly, we've had to address a lot of myths. And of course, we have the whole social media frenzy going on at the same time. It's really important for people to know that, yes, even though they will jump right on your hand, they will not bite or sting you. They can't. They don't have a mouth part that can bite. It's a piercing, sucking mouth part. And they've never tried to pierce and suck to feed on a human that I know of. So they're friendly and not harmful to hold. They do not hurt structures. This is a picture of, you know, in the fall, in the warm days, they might gather on the warm side of buildings, but we're not recommending any kind of pesticide application be made to those areas. We have had some unscrupulous pest control companies come through the area. And, you know, in a way, this has been a little bit of a mini gold rush. So we've had early on where they were doing high pressure sales to spray structures. And some also like really aggressive management plans for trees. And what we're trying to do is educate people so they don't fall prey to those kinds of practices, and to educate the companies so they don't, so they don't think that's the right thing to sell. So of course we have to teach people what it looks like in all of its life stages. This is another thing that makes it very difficult to educate people about, because it looks so different. The eggs, you have to learn how to recognize them so you don't move them. The nymphs are the black and white stages, and at the last nymphal stage, they get red coloration. Then they turn into adults. The adults mate, lay eggs. The adults will all die with the killing frost. So we're right at the end of it for this year. They're all going to die when we get a killing frost, and the only life stage that will survive the winter are the eggs. So we put together these images and graphics, and we have the color pictures on the side, and we go to great lengths to try to teach people what they look like. I really focus on teaching people what the egg masses look like, because those are the ones that are probably the most likely to be transported and start a new population somewhere. You can very easily transport a lot of lanternfly for a long time in the egg stage. So, but you get a lot of confusion about this, people don't understand the intermediary steps. We had one person call me up and was really mad at me because I hadn't published anything on what it looks like when it molts. So here, what is that? This is a great picture from Bob McMullen, one of our arborists over in Bucks County, showing the adult crawling right out of the 4th instar nymph. So it's the kind of metamorphosis where there's no cocoon or pupa. Nymph molding to an adult. So I teach people about what the eggs look like. The female lays her eggs in rows. There are about 35 eggs per egg mass, but it can vary pretty widely. And then the female will cover her eggs with a putty-like substance that protects them. And sometimes she misses some of them. So you see some of those eggs that were never covered. That's not unusual. Those eggs still will be viable. Even if we get really cold winters, you may just see a lower hatch rate, but we know they can still hatch. And then I took a picture of the same egg mass later that season in March, and it has changed its appearance considerably. So it dries down, it develops these cracks, and it's hard to teach people what they look like because they can look different. So this next picture comes out of our new management guide. We feel so strongly about teaching people what the eggs look like that we wanted to show egg masses in different condition. So we have one here that has absolutely no covering. We have one that's covered, but some of the eggs are left uncovered. We have one that is starting to age, and that covering is cracking and flaking off. And then on the very end, we have an egg mass where the rainwater has washed some of the covering off, and you see the eggs protruding out from underneath, but you see how they all look very different. So this is an educational message that we need to get out there. The egg masses may vary in color and degree of covering that protects them. Make it work better. And then there are other eggs out there in nature, of course. This happens to be a spotted lanternfly egg mass on the left, and on the right is a gypsy moth egg mass. So in this case, these are both insects that we can destroy the eggs and feel good about it, right? But there are some beneficial insects that also, and that's even more difficult to teach people what the beneficial insect eggs look like. So if you want to help people understand what lanternfly looks like and teach them about some things that it is not, Eric Day and Teresa Dellinger down at Virginia Extension have great fact sheets for each of the life stages. So these are the lookalikes, and this is the egg one. You can find that really easily just by Googling Virginia Tech or Virginia Extension spotted lanternfly lookalikes. There's one for nymphs and there's one for adults. So that's a really good piece if you're trying to educate people. So I want to rewind and take you kind of back to where we were in Pennsylvania in the early stages. So the yellow townships show you where it was first discovered. That was the original 5 townships that were under quarantine for lanternfly. And yes, that's where I live. And then, you know, this shows the addition of the townships. And then at a certain point, it got too confusing to keep adding townships in Pennsylvania, and they went to a county system. So this shows how it has spread out from the epicenter. And this led to a lot of media attention and a lot of panic. It was just really an incredible thing to experience. We had hope in the beginning when it was so small geographically that perhaps we had a chance for eradication. So we really, you know, threw our heart and souls and everything we had into that effort. We really went after the tree of heaven. So that's the tree that they really like. And in the beginning, there was this hypothesis that somehow lanternfly needed tree of heaven to complete its life cycle. So here's a picture of a tree of heaven. It has this big compound leaf. We went through great effort to help people learn to identify tree of heaven, which I think is still a very worthy thing to do. There are some native lookalikes that you want to make sure people aren't destroying, like staghorn sumac, probably walnut. You know, I mean, walnut could be a weed if it's in the wrong area, but has a lot of wildlife value. So the tree of heaven has these pinnately compound leaves, a smooth leaf margin, 1 to 2 lobes at the base of the leaflet. You can see them, they almost look like thumbs sticking out. And the big one is to smell it. If you crush the leaves or break the stems, it really smells like rotten peanut butter. It smells really bad. So learn to identify the tree of heaven. So we went after lanternfly first by thinking, oh, you know, tree of heaven draws them in like a magnet. It really does. So we started trying to destroy as many tree of heaven as we could, but leave just a few standing and treat them with systemic insecticides and use them as a trap tree. So have you heard about that? And we did a lot of that work. And I think that's still going on. And I think it's still a really worthy thing to do. You can really kill a lot of lanternflies that way with very small amounts of insecticide. And it's good to be getting rid of the tree of heaven anyway, because it's an invasive and doesn't have a lot of wildlife value. Oh, there's the lobes at the base of the leaflet. So Dr. Kelly Hoover at Penn State said, well, you know, if we're really throwing so much effort behind this trap tree strategy, we have to figure out if lanternflies really do need it to complete its life cycle. And this is the work that she did. This is still kind of going on, but we have 2 years of data out of it. So she had these cages that were complete enclosures. She had some trees in there that we know they like, willow, there was a silver maple, there was river birch, walnut. Half of the cages had a tree of heaven and half of them didn't. And then she had a postdoc researcher follow the development of lanternfly in those cages with either access or completely no access to tree of heaven throughout the season. And this is the second year of data from his paper. So on this side, we have cumulative egg masses that he counted, and the bottom axis are the dates. And when they started to lay their eggs, the lanternflies that had access to tree of heaven started laying their eggs earlier, and they laid more eggs. So somehow the tree of heaven makes them more fit, healthier somehow. The orange bars show where the lanternflies without Alanthus started laying their eggs and how many egg masses they laid. So they were able to complete their whole reproductive cycle without tree of heaven. So we're still using the trap tree method, but it's not the kind of silver bullet that maybe we had hoped in the beginning. All right, so then we turn to this idea of, well, you know, maybe there's things out there in nature that will control them. So we've known all along that spiders and praying mantids, wheel bugs, birds, you know, there are creatures that are eating lanternflies and killing them. But they're not again like the silver bullet. It's not the only answer. So in some systems, insect systems, we can use biological control that are very targeted for the insect pest. So we started looking for these tiny parasitic wasps. And when I talk about that to the public, I get this fear reaction. Oh, wasps, you know, like the people are afraid of them. They're so tiny, they're like 1 millimeter long. You see the little bar down there? And there's different kinds of these wasps. There are a few that are already here, and we have found a few cases where parasitic wasps that are naturalized or native have killed lanternfly eggs. So there's another kind in Asia that will kill the nymphs. But again, we haven't seen as much of that activity as we would like to see. This is where we need all of your eyes and ears out there. If you see lanternfly eggs that have been attacked by a parasitoid wasp and you see emergence holes, or you see wasps that are these tiny little wasps that are like after the eggs or after the nymphs, try to catch what you're seeing. Put it in a little jar of alcohol and get it to either your extension office or even to the Department of Agriculture. The researchers are looking for this, and they're few and far between, so we need everybody to be looking for these natural controls. They have brought 2 species of tiny parasitic wasps from Asia, from the native range of lanternfly, and currently those are in a quarantine facility in Massachusetts, and they are trying to do the work to figure out if they, first of all, could be useful and effective, and also if they would have any unintended consequences on native insects. So that work is super, super complex to do. I'm really always in awe of that lab, that what lengths they go to try to do that work. It's a long way down the road if and ever we'll be able to introduce a predator or a parasitoid from Asia into the United States to control this pest. So we'll see. However, we have noticed that there are some fungal pathogens that will kill them, and there's a couple of these. So Cornell has taken the lead on this research, and we are interested again in learning if you're finding anything. So Eric Clifton is the researcher that's doing most of the work. This is his picture. This is a picture of lanternflies that were killed naturally by one of these fungi called Bavaria bassiana. Bavaria bassiana is available as a formulated insecticide. So we often use it in greenhouse settings. So Penn State embarked on some really interesting research for the last 3 years using large-scale sprayers, both air blast land and helicopter applications against different life stages, using these Bavaria bassiana formulations to see if we can kill lanternflies in forested areas with a natural biocontrol. So we've had mixed results. We haven't been able to get the system to work well enough to make it something that we can recommend. I think that work will continue, but again, to get these kind of things worked out takes a long time. So it is not selective. The question is that selective for lanternflies, and it is not. It will kill other insects, although we really haven't seen it killing pollinators, and as part of that study, we have a tremendous amount of work going on looking at the pollinators in those forested areas. So far we haven't seen it hurting them. Yeah, and we have not found it hurting bats either. This is different than the fungus that causes white nose syndrome, if that's what you're thinking about. Yeah, it's a different fungus. But I mean, all of these kind of concerns is why this stuff doesn't just automatically get approved for recommendations and used quickly. All right, so and then the other thing that is kind of going on is we have in the public people that are just thinking every plant that's dead is caused by lanternfly. And it's, you know, social media helps perpetuate these kinds of notions. So was it really the lanternfly? Don't be so quick to blame everything on lanternfly. So there's a maple there that the property owner thought in this commercial site that it had to be from the lanternfly. Well, it wasn't, and it wasn't verticillium wilt either. We cultured and didn't find it. So there's many factors in the landscape that contribute to stressed trees, and spotted lanternfly is just one of those. So that's a really important message to teach people. Another really important thing is please do not use home remedies to control lanternfly. So all these things that people are finding, you know, under the sink and in their garage, and no, please don't use this. You know, if it has a sprayer on it, everybody thinks, you know, they're desperate. They run inside. They're like, oh, this has a sprayer. Let's try this. Home remedies may be unsafe for humans, pets, and plants, and they are technically illegal to use as insecticides. So we have some really good real insecticide products that have very low mammalian toxicity, low impact on pollinators that we can direct them to instead. And they have directions. And then, you know, try to set people's expectations accordingly. What are we really trying to accomplish? So this is a picture of a neighbor who had a lot of lanternfly. These are tree of heaven. This was in her yard. And, you know, she really wanted to get rid of all of them and not have them bothering her when she's sitting out on her back porch. Well, even if we'd spray and kill all of these, when they're moving around in the fall, and the nymphs too, they'll move. You can't prevent them from moving onto any specific property. So she's a person that I would never advise to spend the money to spray. But if you did want to spend the money, you still have to have your expectations accordingly. Oh, you have a question? Okay, well, I can take it quick. Okay. All right, so how are we, you know, how do you teach about this? This is in the new guide, the thicker book. And this is one way, after a long, long time of thought with my colleague, Amy Corman, and some of my coworkers, you know, we try to put it into a chart, like how do we talk people through this? So you get the call and you spend 45 minutes talking about their particular specific situation. It's not easy to do, but it's necessary. There's no one size fits all answer for spotted lanternfly. So we have this chart. First, you think about how many spotted lanternflies are present. Is it low, tolerable, undesirable, or intolerable? And I always remember to say, if you're in an area where there have been no spotted lanternfly up until you're finding them now, that's one is not tolerable. You need to try to kill it and report it. But if you're in, you know, eastern Pennsylvania, most parts of probably western New Jersey, if you have a few egg masses or nymphs or adults, it's probably something that you can tolerate. You don't need to spend lots of money on insecticide applications. And then the other part of this chart is the likelihood of impact. What plants are present and what could it affect? So, you know, are there few of their favorite plants, many of their favorite plants? Do you have plants that are under stress for other reasons? Are they newly planted? And, you know, like how, and again, how many are present on those plants? And of course, your proximity to vulnerable plants, young plants, nurseries, vineyards, that sort of thing, and transportation corridors. So, and then you see we have these kind of colors. So the green areas are, I can get it to go, low risk, going up to the red areas, which are more like a high risk situation. So we didn't fill in all the boxes with words intentionally. You know, it's a way of thinking about it. It's not a chart that you can say, you know, this is definitively my situation, but I think it helps the conversation. Clicker's driving me crazy. Okay, so, and then when you're thinking about how many lanternfly are present and what is the likelihood of impact, at the same time, you need to be thinking about what plants are they on? So we're teaching people monitor. Get out there and really notice where they are. Lanternfly will move throughout the season. So in early spring, we often see them on roses, on perennials. Of course, on grape and tree of heaven, we see them throughout the year. As they get bigger, they seem to prefer black walnut, butternut. A little later on, they'll start moving to the birch, the willow, the sumac, and they'll be on the red and silver maple in the fall. They really like to lay their eggs on those trees. And of course, then the eggs are present for them to be hatched out in May. So watch the cycle. If you have a rose and you have a lot of nymphs on your rose and you wait a week or two, they're probably going to go somewhere else. So you might not need to try to treat that. So think about where they are, do your monitoring. And then we start talking about integrated pest management and kind of, you know, working them through the management options. So we always start with cultural controls at the bottom there, promote plant health and remove their favorite hosts. Don't assume all damages from spotted lanternfly. The physical and mechanical control methods include scraping and smashing eggs. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Using tree traps and swatting and being nymphs and adults. Biological control, we talked about that. It's happening to some degree naturally, but at the moment, we're not recommending trying to augment that in any way. Reduced toxicity chemical controls, and then traditional chemical controls. And the next chart that I'm going to show you when we get to the chemical lists, they're on there. So as you think about your lanternfly situation and your resources and the potential impact, you kind of figure out where you are on this chart and what kind of methods make sense for your situation. And as you go up the scale, the environmental impact and the cost may increase. So then we have this table that talks about the timing of using these control methods. So maybe you've decided kind of where you are in this scenario, and then it matters what time of year it is. So things like don't move any life stages, that's all year round, right? But spraying eggs with a dormant rate of horticultural spray oil as an opicide, and I have a few slides of that here in a minute, you can only do that when the eggs are viable. So that's through the winter months. Use circle traps, contact insecticide applications, systemic applications, and the appropriate timing for them based on the research that we currently have. So we talk about these mechanical methods, scrape and smash eggs, right? And people have really done a lot of this kind of work. And certainly you can kill a lot of lanternflies that way. But they cut some trees down and they counted where the eggs were, and they found out that most of the eggs on those trees were up high in the canopy. So you can only do so much, and you never find them all. You will never find them all. So you can put these sticky bands on trees. And I think, you know, we've seen a lot of this in Pennsylvania, especially early on. You can see, you can catch thousands of lanternflies that way. They have a behavior where the nymphs will fall out of the tree canopy. They go back to a stem of some sort of trunk and they climb up. So they need to find a place to feed. And as they go up, they'll get stuck on that sticky band. So we did a lot of sticky bands early on. Our Department of Agriculture was distributing bands and collecting information about how many people were killing in different areas. But they have a major drawback that people have caught wildlife on them and beneficial insects. So we are now talking about using a wildlife guard over every sticky band. And this shows like a window netting over it. It's tacked at the top with just a thumb tack. And it's kind of like a skirt. You know, you have to have it open enough on the bottom for the lanternflies to get up in there. So use window screening to build a wildlife barrier. That's a really necessary practice. The other thing they've done here is they've cut the band down into a third of the size. So you just have to change it more often. So if that fills up, change it. But that way you don't have all this exposed sticky surface. They're only getting caught at the bottom anyway. So that's another wildlife safety measure that you can use. But at the same time that all this was going on, there was some research about these circle traps. Has anyone seen circle traps yet? Yeah, so they're like, they call them funnel traps, another name, and they're open at the bottom, and then at the top, when the lanternflies crawl up in that open like skirt, they'll go through the top, which is like a funnel, and they get into the collection container, and then they can't find their way out, and they die. So you can buy them commercially from one company, or you can make them. And we've had a lot of people buy into this. So build your own circle trap. We have a fact sheet, and this shows some of the pictures. This is me in the early days of COVID, building circle traps out of whatever I could find, rummaging around the garage on my kitchen table, taking pictures. And in 2021, we had 111,000 views on our website. And I've been really just amused and encouraged by people's adoption of this. You can kill thousands of lanternflies in a circle trap, and you can reuse them, and they have much less threat to wildlife. So, yeah, you have a question. With the funnel traps, do we use the 7.5 beetle and other beetles work for that? Yeah, so this is modified from the pecan weevil trap. It's a modified trap for another insect already. So, and I have, in my experience with these, you build one, you see how it works, and the next one you build, you might modify it a little bit. Like my very homemade fact sheet is not the final answer, and a lot of people have made improvements to it. Rutgers has a great video about how to build a circle trap. The same way I use the tops of milk jugs, but here's a slide you'll probably enjoy. Anybody here from Mercer County? Yeah, so the Mercer County and the park system, an Eagle Scout made 550 plus circle traps. You have the article. And I loved this because this Eagle Scout was really creative. He couldn't cut out enough milk jugs. So he got somebody to 3D print the funnel part of it, which is super cool. And I think he should sell those because I'm tired of cutting out milk jar tops. Oh, that's awesome. So they're distributing them. Yeah, that's awesome. So if people are into these circle traps, maybe talk to Mercer County and maybe you can provide some of the materials that people need. That'd be great. You can catch a lot of lanternflies that way. And although we haven't been able to measure it, you would have to think that protects the health of individual trees. My one concern is that people don't take them down and that they turn into trash. So that's kind of, you know, the follow-up part of it. All right, so how much time do I have? So we can kill eggs with ovicides somewhat, and there was a lot of interest in this in the beginning. What we're currently saying is use a dormant rate of horticultural spray oil. We're saying to use it in that late winter, early spring timeframe because that's when we did the experiments. We don't really know yet if it would work as well in November and December. But remember, 98% of the eggs are above where you can reach. So if you can't reach it with your spray, you're not going to kill the eggs that are up high either. Complete coverage of the egg mass is required to be effective. These studies were done on small scale with little squirt bottles, not, you know, real sprayers. There is a study that's out. The data isn't collected yet from this spring, but there was one of my coworkers did, you know, like an air blast sprayer. But you really do need good coverage. The eggs are also laid on other materials that are not going to be treated, like the underside of rocks and fence posts. Even at the highest labeled rate of application in our studies, we had 28% hatch. So you're not killing all of them. Phytotoxicity at the highest rate, labeled rate, was found for one product, and that was in the early spring when the buds were starting to swell. And consider the cost of these applications. So again, it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's not a silver bullet. And then we have other insecticides. We have the contact insecticides, which some people call foliar, but in the case of lanternfly, they're often used when the lanternflies are on the trunk, so you're not really spraying the foliage. So I just have contact. I think it's more correct. And then we have systemic insecticides that get absorbed into the tree and make the whole tree potentially toxic to the lanternflies. This is a picture of some of the research we did on some of the contact insecticides early on. So for contact sprays, some important things to note. You need to do it after they hatch, of course. You can't spray in the winter or, you know, long before they hatch, and then it's not going to be effective. You want to avoid blooming plants to protect pollinators. Most products have limited residual activity. There are some that will go as long as 2 weeks, maybe 3 if you're lucky. There's always concerns about pesticide drift, and there are varying levels of toxicity of these products to non-target organisms. So this is if, you know, if you have a backpack sprayer and you're going out after, you know, you're trying to kill them on contact. So in the guide, and you know, this is one of these charts that you can't see the type on, but you have it in front of you in your handouts. These are the insecticides that to date we have the most information about how well they kill lanternflies. And there are some things on here that are traditional chemistries and some things that are more, you know, environmentally soft products. So you can see them here. And we're really trying to encourage people to not use household products and automotive things and use these products that they buy from a garden center, something that's a labeled insecticide. And then we have systemic applications. So these are products that get absorbed into the plant. We do this after bloom, so we're trying to avoid concerns of the systemic insecticide getting into nectar and pollen. This tends to use less active ingredient and is very effective in doing that. They have a longer residual life, so the systemic products can last several weeks to really several months. There are different application methods and there is different timing. And then the calculations and the calibration, I think, is the hardest part for a lot of people. So if you're going to be doing this, you have to make sure you get the right dose into the tree. And if you have an application error or a calibration problem and you underdose the tree, then they don't work. So there's a lot of details behind that that are in the guidebook for you. So the systemic products that we have evaluated that have worked for spotted lanternfly contain either the active ingredient dinotefuran or imidacloprid. Imidacloprid, we have had more variable results. Dinotefuran might be a little harder to find. Professionals certainly can get it, and the homeowners can buy it on online sources. So, so the timing is a little different. Dinotefuran, we're saying you should apply it from July to September. It's very water soluble. It gets into the tree very quickly. Imidacloprid is less water soluble. So we're saying try to hit that window after flowering and up until the end of July to get that one into the tree. And then I'm going to wrap it up with talking about some of the things we're observing this year in Pennsylvania, and especially in like the central part of the original infestation zone. We are seeing population fluctuations, and this reminds us of other insects. So I pulled this chart from Connecticut that shows the gypsy moth populations. You know how gypsy moths will, some years they're really bad and other years they're not so bad, and it's kind of this cyclic, and you see that throughout the years there. And that's one way that I try to explain to people what might be happening with lanternfly. And this is hypothesis at this point. But what causes those shifts in cycles and what might be doing this for lanternfly? So this year in my part of Berks County, it was very, very hard to find lanternfly throughout the whole beginning of the year. The nymphs are high up in the trees. You don't really see them. And I saw many fewer than I have in previous years. Now that they're adults and they're down low in the trees, they're around, but there's not as many as there were. So we're definitely seeing these fluctuations. So we have these different factors. We have weather conditions, and they all intersect. Natural enemies, so like if you have a really rainy year, those beneficial fungi might be more active. So you see the intersection there of weather condition and a natural enemy. Host plant availability and health. A lot of our, especially tree of heaven and grapevines, and to some degree the walnuts in our area, they're stressed. They're pretty tapped out from heavy feeding of lanternflies for so many years. So we think that that has something to do with it. And then, of course, there's these other factors swirling around this theory. Control measures taken. People in our area have killed a lot of lanternfly for a lot of years. Is that having an effect on reduction of the population? Maybe. And how do you measure that? We need an insect ecologist, and we don't have one right now. And then population density and dynamics. Some insects, when they build up to really high populations, there's something that triggers them to disperse. And you know, we kind of see lanternflies moving around when they're adults, they fly around. But again, we haven't been able to quantify that or identify any specific trigger to get them to do that. So we think, you know, this is the next article I have to write for our website, why these population fluctuations, and try to explain some of this. And then we need some research in place to look at it and to see if it's any way that we can predict it or use some of these factors in transportation corridor areas or around vineyards to protect the agriculture. And it's going to be a long road, but the bottom line is spot it. So identify it, make sure you're killing the right thing. Destroy it if you can. Use recommended practices, and you know, be careful. And here in New Jersey, report it to the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. Paul Kurtz talked to me earlier from your NJDA, and he has his website for reporting. It's super easy to find. I was looking at it last night. Report it and don't move them around. So that's really, in plain words, the bottom line. And you have to figure out how this works for your situation. So we have a big team, lots of people that have helped. And I'm going to stop and see if I can answer questions for a few minutes. Go ahead.
What made Burke's Ground Zero?
Okay, so the question is, what made Burke's Ground Zero? We believe it came in commerce. So, and it was unintentional through that commerce. But, you know, we're shipping things around the globe all the time. And really, it could have been anybody in the area that somehow brought egg masses from Asia. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is about Christmas trees produced in PA coming into New Jersey. So they fall under the quarantine order for Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And the growers are doing really a fabulous job. You can imagine how difficult that is. But some of the practices they're doing to try to prevent them from coming in, they're trying to control the woodland area around them, both by reducing tree of heaven and their favorite plants. In some cases, you know, spraying those areas, and then through inspections. I've been in some of the Christmas tree farms in Pennsylvania, and I have seen lanternfly egg masses on Christmas trees, but they were only at the very bottom of the tree. So if they limb the tree up a little bit and they lay on like thicker twigs, I think there's a lot you can do just before that tree leaves the lot. And then if they would hatch out in a home, they're tiny little nymphs and they desiccate and die in a day or so. So, you know, it's not like you see on social media where it's like hordes of lanternfly adults flying around your living room. It couldn't happen. It just is impossible for the life cycle to work that way. So we need to educate people that a Christmas tree is a natural product. If a spider comes in on it, or, you know, heaven forbid, a lanternfly, just vacuum it up and go on. Of course, we don't want that to happen. And we don't want people to bring Christmas trees indoor and then put them outside or throw them, you know, along the road like people do, and they could spread that way. But really, if you inspect those trees, it's very unlikely the way they lay on them. Okay, other questions? Go ahead.
What are their natural enemies?
Okay, so the natural enemies, so we know some general things will feed on them, like spiders and praying mantids, wheel bugs, the assassin bug group. We even know a lot of birds will eat them. But then I think more importantly, we have some things that are more specific, like these fungi that can kill them. And I think, you know, that's, in my mind, hopefully going to help us stabilize the populations. I think the natural enemies part is super important. Other questions? Yeah. Okay. They've all been effective. If you do any of the methods, and there's really 4 ways to use it. So there's the soil drench, there's soil injection, there's the trunk spray, and there's the trunk injection. The trunk spray can be super effective, but you have to make sure you get it calibrated right so you're dosing the tree at the right level. You have to be using the right amount of water, the right amount of product. The timing of year is really important. So we're saying dinotefuran, July, August is the best time, into September. I've seen people mix up a tank and just kind of go around and spray a bunch of trees, and they're not paying attention to how much of the tank mix is actually getting absorbed by each individual tree and underdose the trees. Or they're impatient for the tree to take it up. Like, you really almost have to spray it once and then wait a little while and then come back and spray it again. You can practice with water to kind of gauge that at first. But if you are impatient and you let it run down into the soil, then, you know, if you don't have enough water to really get into the root system, I've seen more applicator errors in trying to apply dinotefuran and mostly as trunk sprays. So you read those labels. The labels are complex. I read them with a highlighter. I have someone check my math. It's not easy, but it works. It really works. You just have to really be careful. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is about emamectin benzoate, and that is a product that's used for other insects, especially the emerald ash borer. And the arborists were hopeful that that was going to be something they could, you know, when they're on the property to treat ash trees, maybe they could treat some other trees for spotted lanternfly. It does not have good efficacy for spotted lanternfly. Yeah. Yeah, so the proper way to kill eggs if you're scraping them off of trees, we want you to scrape them into a container and add some sort of alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is probably the easiest, but hand sanitizer has alcohol in it, and really leave them in that bag. So they need the alcohol to kill them. If you scrape them onto the ground, they can still hatch. So I don't always have all that around the container, the alcohol and everything. You can just smash them, and it's a little messy, but it's very satisfying because you know that like the innards of the eggs like squirt out and you know it's dead. So you can just smash them. Am I out of time? Okay, well, thank you all.
Will you be around for? And will you be around for questions after?
Yeah, I'll take questions outside in the hallway.
Okay, great. Thank you.